Welcome to episode number 8 of the Castbar. We keep cranking through the holidays to deliver news that a group is trying to remake your childhood. We act as gods examining the world that we enjoy, answer a question about questions, and review the dead shadows of Warlord's dungeon. Thank you, and enjoy. Welcome everyone to the Castbar, the World of Warcraft podcast channeling your content with no interrupts. It is Sunday, January 4th at roughly 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. With me I have Evan.
How you doing, man?
Doing great. And Florian.
Hey there.
Welcome. So is everyone back home and settled and everything and ready to actually return to normal life?
Pretty much. It's been a nice, quiet holiday time. And now it's time to just go back to the grind as usual. Although we certainly didn't take a break here at the Castbar.
Certainly did not. About you, Evan. You still going on?
Yeah, I actually got back to the grind the later part of last week, so I'm ready for the next Monday. I feel like I'm a little bit more prepared than those people who've been lazing around for the past 2 weeks.
Sure. Yeah, I only got 1 day for Christmas off and 1 day for New Year's off, so the grind didn't really feel like it ended for me. It was more like, we'll just take a little break from work and have some nice family time, and then we'll go back to it. Couple fun things on my end. I stayed up way too late the other night and managed to get silt hide, so I now get to ride around on a blue hippo.
I saw a post recently about that. Somebody made a GIF, videotaping, I guess, the movement of that guy's feet. Is it comically fast? Have you noticed anything like that?
Well, it's not even just the hippos. Like, I'll jump on him real quick and look, and because it looks like the animation is actually set up better for a walk. Like, the walk animation when you're not running at full speed, when you do the role-playing walk, it looks really good, really polished, it's really smooth, and the steps are very appropriate. But the problem is that when for animals like a hippo, or especially like the boars or anything like that we're able to ride now, they really made this really beautiful walking animation, but when you take them out of the role-playing speed, all it does is speed up that animation, where it's kind of like a horse in that, the horses actually have different animations where it seems like, do they? I have to go check now. Where I don't believe that they created them for the hippos.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know when
yeah, they have different animations. Like the horse has a walking and a run animation, so it has its gallop and then its little steps.
Oh yeah.
Whereas the boars and hippos don't. Sorry, go ahead.
I played a Tauren throughout Classic WoW, and I guess back when 100% movement speed, or 100% bonus movement speed with the Epic Mount was about the fastest you could go before you had like Crusader Aura, which is introduced in the Burning Crusade, I think, and on a Pale Horse for Death Knights now. And then the Stables bonus, you can get beyond 100%, and that Kodo can start to look really silly, being such a big animal moving its feet so quickly. So I imagine it has the same kind of syndrome there.
Yeah.
I guess, yeah, one of the things you could do animation-wise is maintain this kind of illusion where every time the animal puts its foot down, it stays in the same place on the ground until it lifts it up again. So you have this really rapid kind of pitter-patter walk. Or you can slow down the running animation and have it have kind of smoother, slower steps, but have it kind of sliding on the ground as it goes faster than it appears to be going from a mechanical standpoint.
Right. And, like, I haven't seen a hippo run, so I'm not entirely sure what that would look like. But I don't know. I know a lot of people, it bothers them, but as you said with the Kodos, it's been around for a while, so I mean, really, like, is this something we're just going to bring up now?
Well, I mean, I don't know. Hippos have a land speed of 30 kilometers an hour, according to Google, which is about 19 miles an hour. A lot faster than a human can run. I don't think they're like going cheetah fast, so I think this game is pretty fantastical in saying that the hippo like that at that size could achieve that speed in general.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. This is getting a little weird. We don't have to
way too technical.
dissect this.
Anything achievement-wise or notable-wise, Warcraft-wise?
I had the best Highmaul pug of my entire life. Probably the best raid pug I've ever been in my entire WoW career. We managed to one-shot every boss, except for a problem we had on Butcher with a raid member that wasn't in our voice chat. It got the wrong instructions. But I'd never done Tectis before. We had a really elite group of people. I guess everybody was just kind of had their head in the game, or a lot of them had experience in the fight. I didn't. And I was running with my guild, and 4 of the people from my guild, we had never done the fight. And we one-shot Tectis, which I was really surprised about, and went all the way to Korog. Did a little bit of progression, got a few attempts on Imperator, and then called it a night after that. But I thought it was really successful, noteworthy, definitely a kind of a milestone in my Draenor experience so far.
Right on. What about you, Florian? Have you actually had any time to play?
I've been playing a bit on off. It's been difficult because the internet connection where I was staying was less than ideal, so I didn't really get any raiding done, but pretty much just garrisons and crafting. No big accomplishments here.
Sure. Well, in a way, that's still progress. It's just slower. One last notable thing on camping for rares and stuff like I did for Slabhide. One thing I don't like about that is, like, because I got into a group that it was like at like 9, 10 p.m., which was already a bad idea. And they were like, yeah, we've already been waiting for 12 hours. I was like, sweet. And, you know, he has like a 12 to 25 hour spawn time or something like that. And I was like, yeah, he should hopefully be up by like 2 a.m. Well, rolls around, 4:30 a.m. and I'm like, oh God, I'm so tired. I went to work that day, 6 a.m. and I was like, I'm so tired. And I was like, I should just go to bed. And then my brain went, you've already given this like 6 hours of your time and like 4 hours of your sleep. If you walk away from this without this, all of that was for nothing.
Investment bias, yeah.
It's just like, oh. He actually spawned at 6 a.m. on the dot. And that was awesome. And then I killed him. I didn't even learn him or mount. I just killed him, picked it up, and went to sleep. Anyway.
Well, good job staying up that long. I know the long WoW hours are probably a part of my life that had long since passed. That was more like high school, summer break, and college days.
Right? Like, that was not that long ago for me, but staying up that late now is so much more difficult, whereas just, not that many years ago, it was like, oh yeah, 8 a.m., whatever, I'll just sleep when the night comes back.
Yeah, I mean, that was the second most impressive part, that you stayed up that late. The second night afterwards, too. Oh, well, yeah, it happens. I'm glad you got your mount, though. At least it wasn't a complete wash.
And Blue Hippo, because I think the Sunhide Gronling looks weird and creepy. And also, Poundfist has such a longer wait time.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's get into the news. Welcome to the news, everybody. And due to the holidays, it's been pretty much a radio silence. We realized something when we started approaching the holidays and stuff with this podcast, and we gave ourselves a commitment in our slogan, and that is that we tell you that we're going to channel your content with no interrupts, which means that we don't get to take breaks for holidays, because that would be considered an interrupt to me. The question that I did have, though, because like a lot of the podcasts that I listened to took like 2 weeks off. They took both this weekend that we're doing now and the weekend before it, and then some even took the weekend before that off. Weekend is a general term. Not everyone records on a weekend. So, do you guys listen to podcasts regularly?
Very sparingly. There are one or two that I listen to, and it's been a while since I've kind of tuned in, honestly. Just different responsibilities at work now. It was more easy for me to do that when I had kind of a sedentary job and didn't have to do too much talking to people or running around.
Sure. And Florian?
I listen to a few Warcraft podcasts, but general gaming-related stuff.
I listen to a lot of podcasts. My work involves sitting at a desk and just a lot of desk work, and I got a lot of big projects right now, which I'm just working on my own, so there's not a whole lot of interaction with even the other people in the office. So I'm like rolling through podcasts. I have like probably 20 of them just like that I'm, looking for updates on. And I haven't got like any for like 2 weeks, and I'm sitting there scratching going, "Oh my God, I need my fix, man. I'm bored." So I had a question to our viewers, and that's how does it affect you when a podcast skips a week, when the hosts take a week off? I was just curious because, like, I know me. I mean, because of how much I do listen to them. I mean, we have an hour commute into work, and I listen to a lot of them while I'm at work. So for me, I mean, I have to really strive to fill my day as it is with content, and it really hurts that when one of my podcasts skips a week.
Well, if I was in your position, I had a lot to choose from. I know there's quite a few, several dozen podcasts that are related to WoW. Maybe if there isn't, if there's a podcast that doesn't, I don't know, lend itself to being watched every single week or listened to every single week, maybe you have your little backup podcast where if you have a lapse in content with some of your more popular ones or some of your favorite ones, then you can kind of fall back on those and still have a little bit of WoW content.
Well, I've been going, so I used to listen to a whole bunch of ones that I don't listen to now. And when I originally decided to start setting up this podcast and got in contact with you guys and all that stuff, I was like, well, I need to actually learn how to do this. And so I started reading a whole bunch of things of like what to do and what not to do. And hopefully I'm following that guideline somewhat correctly. And, but they started, talking and pointing out things of, what makes a podcast better or worse and more interesting or less interesting. And then I started seeing all of the problems with some of the podcasts that I listen to. And I was like, I can't listen to this anymore. I find this to be so terrible now.
Oh, yeah.
Well, and then there's some that because there's new podcasts popping up all the time. Like, even for Warcraft, I mean, there's been multiple across just the last year that have popped up. Some of them have died, some of them are still going. That's just how this world works. But sometimes there can be one small thing that just completely sets it off for me. Whether it's somebody's voice or I can remember one in particular that they had a section where one of them would talk for a decent amount of time, but that individual would mispronounce a whole bunch of words.
Well, it is a fantasy game, too. I think there's a little bit of leeway in pronunciation. For example, Draenor.
Yeah, that's very true. But I mean, some words they've spoken in the game, like Arthas Menethil. We know that's how his name is pronounced. I mean, there are some things, we have heard people in the game say Tyrande Whisperwind. Not, there's a couple of them that it's like, you don't have an excuse. We know how these are meant to be said.
As a Horde player, I've never heard Tyrande Whisperwind pronounced in my life, and actually I thought it was Tyrande. I don't know. Tyrande, I don't know. I'm not, very up on that pronunciation specifically.
Well, my memory of that much more strongly comes from Warcraft 3, which we'll talk about in a minute. But because she's a much larger player, and you do a lot more personal things with her in Warcraft 3.
Well, it's part of the hard part of the Blizzard developers, and I don't know which team in Blizzard is responsible for generating the names of all the places we go to and bosses we fight and important characters in the story, but in order to kind of allow us to suspend our disbelief and immerse ourselves in the fantasy world, you kind of have to have some strange names, especially orcs and the orcs names, and Draenei need to have Draenei sounding names, and the Burning Legion have very Burning Legion-y names too. So in order to kind of invent that world, you have to really play around with phonetics, and a lot of words end up being spelled strangely. Yeah, they're making things up, and not everything's going to be easy to pronounce, especially because they're these names come from different histories and heritages and languages in the game. And
also there's accents and dialects and stuff. I mean, especially like we talked about previously, the thick accent of the new Draenei that we have from Draenor, how much thicker their words and stuff are. And I mean, there's so many different things like that. I mean, and then you got the gruff tone of like the way that the orcs say things. I mean, and just like brain stopping on the words that I want right now. 'Cause like, for example, in Spanish, you'll roll a lot of your R's, and a lot of the R's in the Draenei names are rolled. Marad, Yirel. It's not Yirel, it's Yirel. And it's not it's not Murad, it's Marad. So they have this accent in there, and it's stuff like that that makes it not only because they don't actually have the accents marked. It makes it harder for people to actually understand how that should be pronounced.
Right, but I'm not about to unsubscribe to somebody's podcast unless they're really butchering something. I don't know. I can understand that getting on my nerves, but I'm going to give them a lot of leeway, especially when it comes to these made-up place and figure names.
They were butchering so many, like, name, like so many things over and over and over again. I'm not going to name a name or the name of their show or anything like that because that's not my business. But I can't listen to them because, oh boy.
All right, so if you have a podcast, two podcasts, and they're the same quality, and one of them gives, takes a week off every holiday, and the other one mispronounces names really badly, which one are you going to stay subscribed to?
The one that takes a week off every holiday. Because I enjoy that one, and it doesn't make my ears bleed.
Interesting.
And that might be a little extreme, but it was very, very hard for me to listen to. And it's because I care about that stuff more. If I didn't care about, how to properly pronounce people's names and stuff, then it wouldn't have mattered. But I do, and so it was like grinding stone against my face.
Well, I guess every time you have a new podcast on the scene, you have to kind of identify a niche and try to fill it. So I guess what we're doing is trying to be there for you, the listener. Every time you download our show, and a week from then, there's going to be a new one to download.
Well, and also, we really wanted to aim for having content regardless of news. There is no news right now. There's absolutely nothing. Nothing has been announced. Nothing has been talked about or anything like that. So, I mean, news-related stuff is completely empty. So, I know a lot of shows that when there isn't any news, there's not a whole lot for them to talk about, which is why we aim to include sections that gave us content, that gave us meat, something that would be entertaining that we could present to the listeners without needing news for it.
Absolutely. Do you have any other thoughts, Florian?
Nothing really on this. It honestly doesn't bother me if a podcast wants to take time off for the holidays. They've got their own things, and I don't know about other podcasts, but our recording method is pretty quick and efficient. Maybe they need a much longer time to set up, get everything recorded, so for them it's a big hassle over the holidays. And even so, if people want to take time off from it, they can, because for a lot of podcasts, I know that people do it as a job. Like, they expect to make a podcast and then make profit from that, maybe through advertisements or something. I podcast because I enjoy podcasting. And that's also how you guys are, as I understand it. And I see no reason to take off from something I enjoy doing. So for me, personally, it doesn't make sense to take off during holidays. But different people might have different situations.
Well, and some people it is their job. I can already think of a couple right off the top of my head that they make their money through their podcast. It's not that they don't enjoy it, but that definitely is their job. And if you want to take time off from your job, I guess you are entitled to do so. But like you said, I mean, right now, for us, this is just something that we wanted to do. We don't have a single ad in this entire show. The only thing that might even be closely considered is giving the dude who does our music credit at the end of the show, but that's because I have to, because I didn't want to spend the money to buy it. And I've looked into how a lot of the other shows do their sponsorships, and it's not like an official sponsorship. Like, you go to Audible and you sign your name up and they give you a link, and then every time someone uses that link, you get $15. And it works that way with a lot of them, of that it's not necessarily that they're sponsoring you, it's just a program that they have to promote themselves, and if it just happens to work, then you get a little bit of boost. And I mean, a lot of the podcasts I listen to use Doghouse Systems, and I've looked into that, same thing. And it's just not something that I felt was necessary because, like, hobbies generally cost you money to some degree, depending on what the hobby is. If your hobby is running, then sure, it doesn't necessarily have to cost you anything to run. But I mean, like, because I pay for the hosting for because we upload everything to a website, and that's how you can download everything, because that feed is spread out everywhere.
Right.
And that's just a cost of in doing this thing that we enjoy, and that's not a big deal to me. If we end up later setting up a Patreon, then that's one thing, because I don't consider a Patreon to be an advertisement. It's just do you want to help us out? But right now I've been more concerned with just making sure that we're flowing correctly.
Yeah.
But we all know that Evan's looking to just be risen into stardom, right?
Yeah. Eventually, I'm gonna get my big break.
Awesome, big podcasting break. I hear those are pretty popular.
Yeah, only going to be more popular in the next couple of years. I think it's really going to take off.
Well, podcasting has actually blown up in just the last couple of years, so we'll see where things go. Moving along, though. The only thing that is even close to being news that's Warcraft related is that we have a group of people out there who have taken it upon themselves to remake Warcraft 3. Now, they're trying to do this purely within the StarCraft 2 engine, which is, that you're allowed to, make your own maps and all that kind of stuff, and it's really easy to import your own models and all that kind of different stuff. That has been around since Warcraft 3. I'm not sure about before then. I know it was really big and popular, and still there is even still a community for it in the Warcraft 3 community. And there's a really large one now for StarCraft 2 with your own personal maps and scenarios and stuff like that. And these people are going to remake the game. The question with this is, one, this is awesome. The question, though, is, will it get through? Because it was a couple of years ago that a group of people were making a MMO that was akin to Warcraft in the StarCraft engine that allowed you to basically, it was going to be a StarCraft MMO with bullets and guns and things, and it was looking really good. But because people do take these projects and they get very large and they get very popular and it gets a lot of notability, it ends up that they gather too much attention, even if they're not doing it for money. It'll gather too much attention and it'll get shut down by the company. And not even necessarily, like, this isn't just a Blizzard thing. This happens in multiple fandoms, multiple communities, because technically everything is owned by Blizzard, and we're not supposed to be doing too much with it or breaking the rules by it. What do you think will happen with this in the end? Do you think we'll have another cease and desist order? Which a cease and desist order basically says, stop it or we're going to sue you.
Right. Well, I'm curious as to at what point this starts breaking terms of service, because they're just using the custom map feature in StarCraft, or they're actually introducing mods. So, like, the only other computer game that gets heavily modded beyond recognition, I think, is like Skyrim right now, the Elder Scrolls 4 or 5. I'm not entirely sure if just modding the game itself to that degree, where you're changing all the models and functions, introducing heroes, things like that, different buildings, if that's against terms of service, or is it using the intellectual property, the Blizzard trademark characters?
Well, I'm sure that with the map designer, map creator, whatever, that is owned, by Blizzard, and I'm sure there's something in their terms of service somewhere that gives them full control over anything that is made by or with it.
Right. I mean, I'm sure you could take some really sketchy and controversial public, events or hot topics in the news and things like that, and make some custom maps that kind of are just made to troll and or incite violence and
made to offend people.
Exactly, and they would probably shut that kind of thing down. I'm not going to voice any examples, of course, but then, assuming they they're just taking Warcraft characters and importing models and starting custom games. And this thing within all of the StarCraft 2 framework, whether that be illegal, and I'm not entirely positive how they're planning on releasing this, if it's going to be through custom games through the StarCraft engine using this custom map feature, or if you every player's going to have to download some kind of packet and install them using some kind of third-party software, and that's where you're violating the ELUA or EULA.
Well, I don't think you'd have to do that, because there's not if the map isn't posted inside, like if someone isn't holding a game on this custom map inside the client, you can't download it. And that's why, like for Warcraft 3, it's called the Hive Workshop. Is a website that is a very good website if you're interested in Warcraft 3 and the design of maps. And it's also just a good place to go find maps. If you still play that game and you want to do, stuff with it or anything like that. The original one. And I imagine that there's similar ones for StarCraft, especially because people they go really far out and above and beyond when they create some of their stuff. I mean, they'll create custom campaigns, which it isn't multiplayer. You download it, load the map, load it in, and play it by yourself because they've put in all this stuff in there that is just for a single person to play. But regardless of whether they're breaking TOS, I mean, I don't believe that anything with StarCraft, with the StarCraft MMO, which incidentally its names completely escapes me, I don't believe they were using anything that wasn't readily available within the StarCraft engine, but they still received the cease and desist order as well.
Well, I've seen some screenshots from the project, and I really do think it looks amazing. I'd love to see something like this out there. I love Warcraft 3 as a game itself. I would definitely go back and play that if you had some updated graphics. However, whether they're going to be shut down, I guess, remains to be seen. Like you said, if they get too popular, and they are clearly breaking the rules, and I think Blizzard has a pretty clear responsibility to shut them down. But if it's on maybe the edge of the rules, or it's open to interpretation whether or not they're breaking terms of service, then I could see Blizzard kind of letting them do their thing. I mean, Blizzard's pretty supportive of fan art and, contests where you use the likenesses of their characters and everything just to appease other fans. I think it's kind of a community building thing. However, I can also see in a business sense where they wouldn't like to let it go through because you have potential Blizzard players playing a game that they're not necessarily paying for, and they're not paying Blizzard developers and Blizzard art team, to develop.
Well, and even more so now, because it would have been that you would have had to have StarCraft to play this. You would have had to have bought StarCraft, but
right.
StarCraft is free now.
Oh, is that right?
You can't play the campaign.
Right.
So you cannot play any of the single-player stuff, and I believe you're not allowed to play ranked. You're not allowed to play the ladder. But multiplayer and custom games and stuff like that, 100% free. You can download and play it right now even if you don't have StarCraft 2. So this would technically just be a bunch of custom maps. So this would be free.
So that's actually pretty good news. I've always wanted to kind of try out StarCraft. I didn't want to make the financial investment. That sounds like it'd be a cool thing to check out.
You can go play it now.
How long has that been the case?
Like a year.
Have you been playing StarCraft 2, Florian?
Yeah, from time to time. I'm not super into the game, but I do like a bit of the StarCraft.
Did you play Warcraft 3 back in the day?
Yes, I did a little bit. But the thing about the current Warcraft 3 situation is I think they'll definitely get a cease and desist, mainly because if people can get a version of Warcraft 3 that is superior to the one Blizzard put out, then they can get it for free, then no one's going to be buying Warcraft 3, which you may remember is still for sale on Battle.net. And I think Blizzard might be going to try to sell it in a how should I put it? They might be trying to push sales for it again because several months ago, someone hacked a new version of Battle.net client and found a bunch of Warcraft 3 graphics in there.
Yeah, they're going to add it to where you can just launch it from your client.
Exactly. And if you can just launch it from your client, it's going to be on that little list where you can also just buy it from your client. Because one of the main reasons I bought StarCraft 2 is because every time I launched WoW, I had StarCraft 2 icons staring me in the face. And eventually I said, you know what, I'm just gonna get this thing. So
I mean, yeah. I can't imagine them. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
So it seems to make sense to me that if someone else is giving out a free, superior version of that product, Blizzard's not going to be terribly excited about it if they're going to try to start getting sales for it again.
Right.
Well, and also this goes into like in the age that we're in right now, we're at this point where there's a whole bunch of people that remember playing games like Warcraft 3 when they were a kid. Relative term on the word kid. And, you know, it's so aged and dated now that they want to see it again, though. I mean, we have lots and lots of calls for remakes on games. Like Final Fantasy VII. I don't know how many times I've asked people to see that game remade. And things like this, because there's so many... Look at Warlords of Draenor as an example. So much of this is like just pasted nostalgia everywhere, and that brought so many people back and brought so much revenue to Blizzard for this. I mean, there was tons and tons and tons and tons, and they said that they got like more than 2 million of the players that left between Vanilla and BC to return because of what Warlords of Draenor is. Things like that. I don't understand from a business and financial standpoint why you wouldn't want to invest the resources to remake something that will be presumably bought by everyone that loves and remembers the original.
Right, and on the same line, look at Hollywood with the remakes of classic films and how that is a huge portion of the theater revenue at the moment these past couple of years, past decade or so.
And they're incredibly popular.
Oh yeah, I mean it's almost silly how much of the market is being taken up by remakes, and all that kind of thing. And the other half is like book and comic adaptations, right?
That's about the entirety of everything.
Huh.
At least that I've seen recently.
So check it out. I'm putting on my tinfoil hat here, my little thinking cap. They remake Warcraft 3 with brand new engines and graphics and release the original storyline and the expansion Frozen Throne. And then they start adapting all of the official canon Warcraft literature into Warcraft 3 story campaigns.
That would be fantastic.
Right?
That would be a fantastic way to deliver that. The flip side of this is that there's been less call from the Blizzard community for a Warcraft 3 remake, and more a stronger call for Warcraft 4. At least from what I've seen of that, more people would just like to see them make another Warcraft-based RTS rather than remake Warcraft 3. I'm sure we'd be happy either way.
So this is the only way I see that working. And Florian can probably back me up on this. When you have World of Warcraft establishing new canon lore every patch release, basically, you can't really fit in another RTS game where would the lore pick up? Would it be a prequel to Orcs and Humans? Would it be in the distant future? I might as well be StarCraft that time if you're going to change like the technological age. The only way I could see it working into the current Warcraft lore that people like so much would be to have an RTS expansion or an RTS game be a intermission between two expansions of World of Warcraft, which I think would just be exceedingly complicated, like what we had the end of Siege of Orgrimmar recently. If there was a real-time strategy game whose campaign focused on the interim between Warlords of Draenor and the end of Siege of Orgrimmar, but I think that's a long shot.
The other idea in that could be is just building it, but if you build it without using characters that are really strong, really recognizable characters that are currently busy, so you introduce new fun characters. I mean, because people think that they just always want to see, Jaina and Thrall and Varian and, etc., leader, etc. They think that, oh man, those are the leaders, the awesome personalities that we've always seen and loved. I want to see more of them. And then Yidel comes along, and she's incredibly popular, and she's brand new. So I think that people are just worried. Like, I think initially it would receive like, oh man, but they didn't include anyone big or important in it. But I mean, some of the biggest stars in Warlords of Draenor aren't the top tier personalities that we're readily playing with.
I don't know. I think a lot of the stars of Warcraft 3, at least. I guess I don't know. You're saying the top stars more of Draenor we're not playing with necessarily right now, like Marad and what's the Akama, I guess, and Drekthar. Those guys you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean they're still like, we can still recognize them, but they're not the superstars that we've readily been using in the past.
Right.
And we've been shown time and time again that Blizzard can create new entities. I mean, Garrosh technically is purely from the World of Warcraft and has been built up over multiple expansions, and now his story is over. And
no, I'm not sure about that. I'm still banking on Garrosh being my legendary follower. So don't pop that bubble for me yet.
Okay.
All right, man.
Okay. But I mean, that was technically something new, and even though he was a really horrible dude, he's still a very popular character because he was very well done. So I don't see why they couldn't just make a Warcraft 4 with new people and have this, just this is what's happening on the large scale while we're dealing with something somewhere else. Because RTS is, armies. Armies are fighting. If anything, they could make Warcraft 4 and make it just be every battleground we have. Instead of being a hero in Arathi Basin, you're managing the base in Arathi Basin. Or Alterac Valley, or wherever.
No, the thing that I think characterized Warcraft 3 and the campaigns were the exceedingly deep and rich storylines, and they really did seem epic, and they involved basically every power, every kingdom in the entire world, Azeroth and the Eastern Kingdoms, if I remember correctly. And I can't imagine them doing justice to the kind of scale that Warcraft 3 existed on by doing this kind of side project and using side characters and making an epic storyline, or trying to make it epic enough to warrant the fan base that Warcraft 3 had, but not stepping on the toes of the World of Warcraft lore progression in a way that we would notice as World of Warcraft players.
Then use characters that are recognized, that we do know of, that aren't following the story in Warlords. I mean, like Valera, the rogue, she's still out there and still doing stuff. You have popular characters that aren't standing on the front lines right now, like Chandra's Feathermoon, the general of the Night Elves. She has a whole bunch of story attached with her from multiple locations. You can just use her instead of having to use Tyrande. You have options, and you can build a lot of your characters that you've put work into larger stars to use again in the future. There's tons and tons of options out there of characters that are really just waiting to be used that you could use in a format like this.
What do you think, Florian? Do you think they'd be able to pull off a Warcraft 4 RTS concurrently with World of Warcraft?
I don't think it's possible for the exact reasons that you mentioned. If it's a sort of a side story, like something with smaller characters on a smaller scale, then it really shouldn't be Warcraft 4. You could make just a Warcraft game that's an RTS that's sort of a side story set in the World of Warcraft, but I don't think a main series RTS game would be able to work concurrently with the MMO. In addition to that, you've also got the problem of StarCraft 2, which would be directly... since Blizzard is still pushing it hard, they're still making expansions for it, so it's going to be competing directly with Warcraft 4 for the same RTS audience and the same RTS competitive slot in esports. So until StarCraft 2 has kind of lost a lot of its steam, I don't even think a new Warcraft game, either main series or a side story, is even possible.
Okay.
No, there's a potential that Michael's right and Blizzard's going to prove all of us wrong and do something truly, truly outrageous.
No, your guys' points are much stronger than mine. So, okay.
So, I mean, if my predictions about Warcraft 4, like I said, are pretty much prequel or distant future, I think are the strongest possibilities.
I'd be okay with either of these. I'd be much more okay with future than past. It would just be more interesting to me because if you limit yourself to the past, you limit yourself to before some of the technologies were created. I mean, unless we're going like way in the past, we're gonna like the Titans are still around.
Oh, that would be pretty
epic.
intense.
Actually, do that. Titans versus old gods.
Yeah, I think the World of Warcraft lore and the lore team they're really good actually, because they have to kind of fight this lore battle on multiple fronts. As we progress in the game, we're learning more about the world that we play in. We're uncovering more about the past, with the Reliquary and the Explorers League being archaeologists in the game, discovering information about lore I could show, discovering information about the Titans and everything that happened before modern era, and then we're also looking towards the future. Blizzard wants to leave their doors open for things like all the baddies that are out there, the Burning Legion, the what's the old gods, all these people.
I can't even tell you how excited my brain just got at the idea of playing that.
But, I mean, if Blizzard wants to keep on going with World of Warcraft and have the lore and the discoveries we make be interesting, I think they need to keep the past and the future both pretty obscured so they always have, like, a direction to go in. Not to mention the purported news that they already have 8 or 9 expansions planned as far as concept already, so...
Well, we already know the past, though. I mean, like, with all the stuff with the Titans and the old gods... We already know that. It just hasn't been, like, really clearly detailed.
Right.
Which, I don't think detailing it out would be a bad thing.
Especially because we know so little about the actual minor characters that would be more on the scale of a player. If I went and played some version of Warcraft where we're interacting with the old gods and the Titans and everything, I don't expect that I would be, Sargeras as a commander. I think Sargeras would be one of the friends or foes or the main storyline characters, but I think I would be playing somebody a little bit more meager.
Well, we could even get to see that happen. I mean, Sargeras was originally a good guy, and then he just encountered so much evil that he just was like, I'm evil now.
I'm evil.
He basically just gave up on the concept of stopping the evil because there's just always more of it.
Yeah, that'd be really interesting, though. That'd be a really interesting direction.
Yeah, I approve of this. I want this posted everywhere. Stat. No, that's wonderful. But on the original note of the Warcraft 3 remake, it sounds like we all pretty much believe that they will be shut down, which is sad because, I mean, the trailer that they have for it is already really pretty. I mean, they've been clearly making their own models for this. But stuff like this just always gets shut down. I've not seen anything that has actually been a big project like this in any fandom for any game ever actually get to be finished.
And yeah, you're right about that. However, there's a optimist, the smaller corner of my mind that wants to be optimistic about the thing. Might say that Blizzard says, hey, wow, good work. I think the support you've garnered from the fan base really shows that people are supportive of this idea. How about we make a deal and we'll buy you out of the whole thing and then release it fair and square. You guys still get to stay involved, and then the players get what they want, which is a updated version of Warcraft 3.
That would be insane, and I think that is something... What's the word for hoping for the unattainable? Hoping for what won't happen.
A little naive to begin with.
Yeah, it's a nice thought, and I'm sure that would be like an insane dream of the people who are making it. But unfortunately, the way it goes is that the real world doesn't work that way.
Yeah, you're probably right.
All right, let's get into a closer look. Welcome to a closer look. Closer look is a section that we do that, one, is what we use to actually still deliver entertaining and fulfilling content when there's no news. But it's also a time that we will sit down and discuss and talk about the finer details or points of something within Warcraft. It could be really anything, whether it's like Well, trying to think of things that we've done across past weeks. I mean, like last week we talked about the way that gold works and the way that it functions and changed and everything that it has applied to in Warcraft and how far gold has come from being something that was completely unattainable to you have plenty of it now, but what do you want to strive for? And what we're going to look at this week is the world of Warcraft, and that is the actual world that we are taking a chance in. And I don't necessarily mean like Azeroth, taking it apart, taking a picture of the grass. But there is 3 different sections to the player base that plays this game. Those being, we have the PvEers, player versus environment, and this is the Raiders, and this is what most people think of right off the bat when they think of World of Warcraft. So, world first races, or just, progression rating, trying to get down, like Evan's Guild, trying to get down heroic Margok, or is it normal?
No, normal so far. We're kind of casual, on the casual side.
Normal Margok, and rating used to, well, you say casual. Rating and casual are not generally associated with one another. Casual rating is something that is rather new in this world. You also have PvPers, player versus player, and this is actually a lot larger of a portion of the game than I think a lot of people realize. Blizzard did that infographic at the end of the year last year that showed that 42% of their player base is pure PvP players, which is substantial. And then we have this new, it's not technically new, but it's being much more strongly catered towards, and that is the casual players. And you will unfortunately hear them referred to very often as filthy casuals, all those filthy casuals. But they're not filthy. They're just casual players of this game, and they are starting to get a lot larger of a presence and getting much more support from Blizzard. First question, Florian, which category do you fall into the most?
That's kind of hard to say. I would say I'm definitely a PvEer. I can definitely say that. I've done a bit of PvP, mostly because I previously played on a PP server, and you don't really have much of a choice when you play on one of those. But I'm definitely more of a PvEer. As far as casual and hardcore go, it's difficult for me to say. I would say I'm maybe either a hardcore casual or a casual hardcore player, depending on how you would say it. I do some raiding, but I'm not doing super hard progression. On the other hand, I'm not that guy who plays a heroic once a week and says, "Okay, I've played some WoW and I'm done." What I do think Blizzard has done is, especially over the last couple of expansions, an awesome job of reducing the sort of the big gap between the casual player and the hardcore player. Because used to, back in the olden times, you were definitely in one or the other camps. You were either a casual player who did just leveling, maybe some heroic dungeons, and that was pretty much it, or you were a hardcore player and all you did was raid. Like, your existence pretty much revolved around raiding. And once again, this is entirely PvE. I can't speak for PvP. And the way things are now, you have more of, rather than this sort of duality, you have more of a spectrum of different types of players. You've got players who just play some heroics or something like that. You've got people who just do LFR. You've got people who do the previously flex raids, now normal raids, which are easy enough that people who don't want to be hardcore raiders can get in there and raid. And because of the way the flex technology works, it doesn't require as big of a commitment from people in terms of time and all that. So I think now there's more of a spectrum than there is sort of this hard differentiation between the different groups of players.
Okay. And Evan, what category do you fall into?
Let's see. It's definitely changed over the years. I think when I started, everybody was a casual at the beginning of vanilla, and then towards the end of vanilla, I feel like some of the some of the people who were raiding Naxxramas at that point were really, really hardcore. Some of the high warlords were really hardcore with the PvP. I ended up getting a little bit into Blackwing Lair, so I guess you could call me a PvEer at that point, just getting my feet wet raiding with Soul Grub and everything. And then Burning Crusade, I got into PvP because I really liked arenas a whole lot, so I was really balanced in that expansion. And then since then, I've kind of let my PvP fall off, and I've gotten more and more on the PvE side. Miss Pandaria, I didn't do any PvP at all. All PvE, a little bit of Mythic, but mostly just Heroics and Normals. And now in Draenor here, I'm starting to peek my head over the PvP threshold there, but still mainly I run a raid team. Mostly I'm focused on achieving raid goals, so I would consider myself more a PvP or PvE player than anything else. I agree a lot with what Florian was saying though about Blizzard reducing the gap between the casual player and the hardcore, and I think that something that we've talked about in the past, these exclusive rewards that take a whole lot of sacrifice and dedication to achieve, like for example,
defeating
the
Mythic weapon the gladiator mounts.
Yeah, and this is the awards you get for the gladiator mounts, the heirlooms from Garrosh, the special mounts from PvE achievements and everything like that. They keep them exclusive for a period of time, I think long enough for the people who earn them to feel like they're really elite. And then afterwards, they kind of open up the gates, and you get terms like welfare epics. People, really purist PvEers really hate the welfare epics. They feel like they just are given away, and it reduces the feeling of an epic piece being a really big accomplishment. But what it does is kind of lets people catch up to at least the prior, level of achievement. After when Blizzard opens up a new avenue for the highest level players to succeed in new content, they kind of open up the floodgates a little bit and let all the other more casual people experience the same content that they've already kind of planted their flag on. And I think that's a pretty good feature, is finding that balance between having exclusive achievements and then also only making them exclusive for a short period of time before you let everybody kind of experience them.
I fall into whichever category is most available to me at the time. Like, honestly, right now, I'm pretty much a casual. I don't have a raid team. I don't PvP much except for on my paladin, which we talked about last week. Evan settled on being a warlock, and I have settled on being a paladin for our arena team. Which, if that ends up going somewhere, then I really love PvP, but I don't enjoy just doing random battlegrounds. I do, but I don't do them to a ridiculous level. And I really like raiding, but I don't have a raid team, and pugs are very hit or miss. Whereas not to sound arrogant, full well know I could be a mythic raider, but I don't have a mythic raid team, nor do I necessarily have the time for the most part. Like, if it was scheduled right, I'd have the time, but it would have to be scheduled to my time, which doesn't work for most raid teams. So right now I am the casual player, just really chilling, leveling up alts, checking stuff out, working on small things,
right?
Leveling up my fishing.
I think another thing, people have been playing this game for 10 years, or at least several years for most of us, and your life circumstances change. You don't have as much time. Your interests change. The people you play with come and go. You might be a PvPer because most of your friends in real life PvP, and then when they're gone and you're left with more of your distant PvE raiding buddies from your old raiding guild, and maybe you're more of a PvPer that expansion. The thing that Blizzard's really done well, I think, is allowed you to try and kind of change and not ever feel like you have a lot of catching up to do. Introducing, like what I was describing, catch-up mechanics kind of allow you to play where you want to and not have that kind of, energetic investment in order to break into a new category. If I decide I want to go PvP, it doesn't take too much time or effort to get at least started with it. There isn't a big barrier to getting into it for the first time.
Right. And they've also made so many things so much more accessible to everybody, between things like Dungeon Finder and looking for raid. But I mean, they've made lockouts much like, this is very new with Warlords, but I mean, lockouts are much more friendly. I mean, there's a loot lockout, and you could, for every single type of difficulty, and you're able to redo a boss and not get loot if you want to still do it with friends. I mean, and Group Finder makes raiding, and Crossrealm, all that makes raiding much easier if you want to even have a semi-casual focus on raiding. It used to be that for PvP you had to have a team that, like, and wasn't necessarily you had to have a team, but like a team had its own rating. So if John, Bob, and Joe create an arena team, they all had to be together for that team to go out. Whereas now you can have a team, but your rating is just yours. It's just tied to you. So, if you can be a 2200 rank scored PvPer, and you could have got there with the same two dudes, but nothing is keeping you from still playing at that level with just John, Bob, and Chuck instead, because Joe's not available right now. And I mean, they have, things you're able to queue up for skirmishes now, 2v2s and 3v3s, to where if you wanted to, just try your hand at arena, you don't have to find someone to go with. You just queue up and they throw you in there. And then, like, the casual side of things is one of the ones that has evolved the most. I mean, Garrisons, people really call it, and it really is, to some extent, a Facebook game. And, Facebook games like Farmville and stuff, to a lot of, play gamers, are the casual game. They don't require as much time and effort. And then, like in Miss Pandaria, we got battle pets. And, sure, there's competitive Pokemon, but let's be honest, most people just play Pokemon because it's fun and you enjoy it, and it's a very casual and easy to play game. And, like, battle pets, I think, are a huge success, and they're a very casual thing. And there's just so much more for casuals to do, and I believe that they will continue on with that, because, I mean, it continuously gives people something to do, even if they're not able to do these other things. The problem and benefit to this is that everything is more accessible, so everything's easier to do. More people are doing it, so that brings people together. But you also have, like everyone was talking about earlier, the purists, the I only PvP and only whatever, that get these other people in there that are ruining their fun because they are dirtying up their battleground. Right.
Well, yeah, I mean, and that might have been the case in Cataclysm when they're starting to introduce these. I'm just throwing out that random time period out there, when they're starting to introduce these kind of like ways to bring people out of casual play, out of this kind of void where there's nothing really to do. You can't get your PvE team together. You can't really do PvP at a competitive level. And before they increase the accessibility options. But now I think they've realized that in order to keep everybody happy, they need to allow people to play any aspect of the game they want and be at a competitive level, or at least not be limited by time invested or anything. And I think they keep the purists happy by kind of maintaining, I think, a pretty good balance with this kind of VIP lounge that they provide for the people that are competing at the highest level. In PvE, I guess the VIP lounge would be Mythic Raid at the current tier. And for PvP, I'm guessing it's going to be rated battlegrounds and rated arenas at above a 22 or 2300 rating.
You don't even really have to get that high. Like that's really pushing the top of the bar. Once you break like 1800, really. I'm sure there's PvPers out there that would completely disagree with me that you're not getting to play real PvP until you hit, 2500 or whatever.
Right. So with Blizzard trying to make all the classes accessible with the ability to prune and changing the ability rotations and things like that, they want it to be easy to learn but hard to master, with a lot of depth and complexity without being complicated. And I think that goes for their in-game systems as well. They want to be, They want to make raiding approachable. They want to make PvP approachable and easy to understand, but they want to install a whole lot of kind of depth into those systems. I think PvP has depth kind of built in as the emergent gameplay when you have two players facing off against one another. And then PvE, it's really on the level designers trying to create difficulties that really require you to use your noggin, and it's not just a gear check necessarily. And I think that's where the depth comes into the PvE side.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, in this expansion, I'm not entirely sure that you can be a casual anymore, and that might be something we want to talk about. If you don't do raids or challenge modes or raided battlegrounds, I mean, what are you doing? If you have your garrison, are you gearing up to do your dailies? What do you use your gear for? What are people who are not interested in PvE or PvP doing in the game right now?
Farming old content because they can and it's fun. I mean, you can do a whole bunch. You can get all the way through everything except for pretty much like 25-man heroic Cataclysm. Like 10-man heroic and 25-man normal, you can easily do in just full heroic gear. Just item level 630 across the board. You can easily get through that with probably any class for the most part. I mean, I went through. No, I'm positive that you can, as long as you're not like a healing class or something, because like I was able to do 10-man heroic and 25-man normal Dragon Soul, so the last raid of Cataclysm, without really any problems at all on my priest. I didn't run into any issues that I can think of aside from just completely fudging something. I mean, and so there's, running old content, playing battle pets, collecting transmog,
role playing.
Yeah, thank you. Role playing. if you're into that. I mean, and it just also LFR is technically very casual. I mean, and especially once we get more of it unlocked. I mean, that'll take up more and more time.
Right.
Something we'll talk about probably next week is how casual getting your legendary ring so far has been.
And then I'm guessing that a lot of people who are casual gamers aren't. I mean, I'm saying on the context of endgame, in the context of level 100, what are they doing? I think a lot of people who are pushing level 100 on one or multiple characters are probably doing it because they're interested in the endgame rating or the endgame PvP. But I think there's more content than ever for people who are just leveling slowly and enjoying questing and using the game more as just an immersive kind of escape from real life. Just to relax in their downtime after work or on the weekends. And I guess it's hard for people to play competitively at the end at the highest level, or at least at endgame, which is, I would say, the majority of people aren't really realizing that there are people who are their highest character is level 85 and they've been playing for 10 years just like everybody else, or highest character is level 72. And just because they're not at level 100, just because they're not pushing max level, doesn't mean that they're not playing the game as much or as passionately as any of us.
No, I wouldn't discredit their playing by any means. It's a game. If you're enjoying playing it, then you're doing it right.
Right. But then it does create conflict when Blizzard starts making changes that affect everybody in order to cater to certain small groups.
Achievement hunting, that's another one. Leveling up alts, that's another one. These two, I mean, obviously anything can be taken to a hardcore dedicated degree. But, I mean, these are generally very casual things to do. Hunt for achievements, level up alts. And then we run into the problem of blending these things together. And two things that immediately come to my mind is people being brought into PvP for one reason or another. There was a huge complaint in Mists of Pandaria over the legendary quest taking you into 2 PvP battlegrounds that you had to win. And that was a very big deal. And then the one that and that's forcing PvE people to do PvP content, to get things that are essentially purely for their raid, and in some raids required. The other one that I think of very strongly, and it's always a complaint every year, is Children's Week. In Children's Week, to get the full achievements for it, you have to go into 4 different battlegrounds and do something in one of them. It's like you got to return the flag in Warsong Gulch, capture the flag. I think you have to do like hold a point in Eye of the Storm. I don't remember what all of them are. I can just look real quick.
Right. It's just like they're not things that it would be easy for somebody to do on the first try, especially if they're not a PvPer.
Here we go. Capture the flag in Eye of the Storm, assault a tower in Alteric Valley, assault a flag in Arathi Basin, and return a fallen flag in Warsong Gulch. And,
weird.
Yeah, and you have to do these. You have to do each of these to get your full Children's Week achievements. You have to. I mean, you don't. It isn't like, sometimes the world events have optional ones, but this puts tons of these people that are just wanting the world event achievement into Battlegrounds, and then you get tons and tons of PvP people going, "What are you doing in here? Get out!" And they're like, "I'm just trying to get my achievement."
Right. Yeah, that does create a little bit of tension. Thankfully, I think that people who are going to be offended by that kind of, intrusion are hopefully going to have enough of a gear score in PvP to be put into a different bracket than somebody just hopping in there to do an achievement and hopping out.
Well, this helps. A recent change will help this in that now, even if you're not in PvP gear, you get bumped up to a certain eye level so that you're not completely irrelevant.
Right.
It still doesn't mean that you're going to know what you're doing. Because, I mean, if you don't have any PvP experience going in there, it's going to be really rough for you.
I think if you're really dedicated to trying to get that achievement, you're probably going to realize that the best way to do so would be to get into a group.
Right. I mean, and that is something that people are able to do now, is that they'll set up war games and just get the achievement through that way, which is very nice that is an option. So nice that is an option. Incidentally, I'm looking, and you know how last week I said that my resolution was to do What a Long Strange Trip It's Been? I do not have a single achievement. I have to do them all. I jumped into my achievement thing to look at the Children's Week thing, world events. Oops. I don't have a single one. I've not done any of them.
At least it's kind of paced by definition.
Right.
I mean,
you do them when they come. But it was still just one of those things I noticed of that I have not done any of them.
That's silly.
So my question though now is, what do you think will be what do you think will be next? I mean, obviously, like, rating and stuff will probably, for the most part, stay the same, but they're going to keep on implementing things that really are going to continue to blur the lines. Or, like battle pets or something like that. Like, I think that in next expansion, we'll get something that is much more directly correlated with what would be considered a player housing. So, you're able to design it a little bit more. You're able to, actually, put things up, change things around. Almost like a Sims game. It's not going to be great, and it's probably going to... I'm not going to say it's not going to be great, because it's Blizzard. It'll probably be fantastic. It's probably going to be received rather poorly because of how casual that seems. But I don't think it'll be a bad thing either. Do you see anything else that could be coming in the coming years?
Yeah, maybe PvP and PvE endgame rating battlegrounds combined, where we're fighting through, for example, High Mall or something like it, and then we get to the last boss room, and in order to fight Imperator Margok, we have to face off against the opposite faction raid team in some kind of Trial of the Crusader battle.
So you mean what is presumably happening every time a raid happens?
Yeah, except it's Horde versus Alliance, and then the winners get to resurrect their allies and face off against the Imperator, and the losers get locked out for the week.
I see that being super epic, yet super, just irritating.
Yeah, it reminds me of the raid entrances on PvP server. It can get brutal.
Oh yeah, those are always rough. But I mean, and we've had those before with Winter Grasp and Tol Barad.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, yeah. That's actually a pretty good example of something like I was describing. When the PvP battle in order to have access to the PvE objectives there, but
But
it isn't
those
so
PvE
fatalistic
objectives
as
were always easy and just dropped PvP gear, which
right.
is
Oh no, though. I mean, they always drop raid gear just like the Celestials. Ever since Winter Grasp, it's had a chance to drop PvP or PvE gear.
you sure? I'll believe you.
I'm almost
I'll
positive.
just trust you. I think you you probably remember better than me right this moment.
Florian, do you think there's anything else that needs to be said about the interaction between PvP and PvE communities and casuals in general?
Or what else might be coming?
As for PvP and PvE, I don't really know. It's always been a really strange dichotomy between PvP and PvE, and while Blizzard has done a lot to try to get PvE players into PvP more and vice versa, I don't think that's something they'll ever be able to completely. It's not a gap that they can completely bridge, per se. They're going to. To me, it's always honestly felt like two different games. Like when I play PvP, I don't feel like I'm playing the same game I play when I play PvE, and this could be from some of my lack of familiarity rather with PvP gameplay, but it feels very different. And one of the other issues it brings up is all of the balance changes that Blizzard has to make to try to balance PvP and PvE at the same time. And in a lot of cases, they're working cross purposes. They'll balance something out in PvP, and something else breaks in PvE. It almost feels like it should be two separate games, and that's kind of how I feel they should go with it. They should have, you log into World of Warcraft and you either do PvE or PvP, and there's no interaction between the two groups, if that makes any sense. And the PvP gear is just for PvP, PvE gear is just for PvE. Maybe classes can even have different skills in PvE or PvP, different spellbooks, depending on what they're in. I'm thinking that's the best solution to that kind of problem, but because it really does feel like two different games to me, and I just don't see it working well if you try to combine two things into one. Particularly your idea with having two raids fight each other for to get a chance to fight the final boss of a raid. I can imagine that causing a ton of tension and just outright nerd rage in the raid community.
Yeah, exactly. No, without a doubt. That's just a kind of silly suggestion. But I mean,
I enjoyed it.
I think one of the two points. One of them is that the facet where PvE and PvP combine naturally and organically is world PvP. Which, I mean, we don't call it world PvE when you're out grinding mobs in big groups, but when you're out in the world, you have PvEers doing PvE objectives and PvPers ganking while they're doing their PvE objectives too. I say ganking, this is kind of a negative term, but starting fights and interacting violently, it will say. And that's always been a kind of realm of the game that Blizzard struggled with. So I think it's a testament to the kind of complexity of this problem where you try to bridge these two worlds together. And you can either have really compelling gameplay, or you can have gameplay that falls short or seems non-existent or seems unfair. Like in Mr. Pandaria, there was barely any world PvP except for the Timeless Isle, where there are no flying mounts. Now in Draenor, we have no flying mounts. I haven't been playing on a PvP server this expansion except for a very little bit, and my only experience playing that very little bit has been getting ganked in Frostfire Ridge on my low-level alts, which is, it can be expected. However, my second point was that this is a unique conversation where you can bring up Trial the Champion, and that one, the raid fight, and also in the I can't remember if it was a 10-man or 25-man as well, where you fight the five, the PvP style battle against the five NPCs that have player classes. Do you guys remember this?
Of course, yeah.
Florian, did you play that expansion or that encounter?
Yeah, I did. It's been a long time, though.
Now, what I'm trying to think is, like, it might be easier to balance these PvP tuning changes with PvE dungeon requirements as far as balance and tuning if PvE resembled PvP a little bit more, like that fight was a very kind of PvP feel to it. And I'm also remembering Magister's Terrace, that when you're at the correct gear, not leveling up a character nowadays, that was a tough fight where you really had to consider what abilities all the people had. Everybody's running around, melee people are in your face, range people stay at range. I mean, there's something about the AI that they programmed into those characters that really made it compelling, like you were actually fighting enemy players. And if all dungeons were kind of like that, and not just so two-dimensional as far as, oh, we have 2 archers and one of them's casting Hellfire nonstop, and it's not really like a PvP fight. Nobody's trying to line of sight you. Nobody's trying to CC your people, I guess, a little bit. But if there were really severe AI changes that made NPCs in dungeons and raids behave more like players, would that change how people enjoy PvE? Would it take away some of the PvE character, or is PvE characterized by kind of a lack of character? You're fighting robots, and it's pretty obvious.
I think it depends on the strength of the AI. I mean, because you can have a really good fight as long as it's designed well and the thought behind it is well done. I mean, if you think about it, like the council fight in BT was a insane fight. It was a hard one to get past, and that's almost just fighting another group of people. So, I mean, if you get the AI correct, I mean, I think it would be great. But I think it's hard to get the AI correct.
But I think that technology is only going to improve. So as far as what's going to be next, and this, different content, the PvP content being, of course, you're against other players, but PvE being so different that it creates just a different, basically a different world, a complete division in the player base. Maybe in the future, PvE resembles PvP more, and that division is less defined or less stark.
Yeah.
That's my prediction.
I guess we'll just have to wait and see. I do believe that we will just continue. It'll continue to expand upon everything that's happened so far as each expansion comes out, or maybe even as patches comes out, depending on the direction that Blizzard is really wanting to focus on. But it's really hard to tell right now. We're not Blizzard. Moving on. Welcome to the mailbag. You can send us an email at thecastbar@gmail.com. We do have a Twitter at Castbar Podcast, or you can call and leave us a voicemail at 508-738-2278. We only have one question this week, and it's a question from us, and we're going to ask ourselves a quick question, and that is, what types of questions do we enjoy? What questions will get aired, and why? This is going to be a preference on each of us. I don't know if our preferences are different per se. I really just enjoy answering questions. If it ends up that one week I have 5 really small questions, I'll put 5 of them up here. What type of questions do you guys enjoy?
I'll let Florian take that one first.
I like all kinds of questions. Particularly the kind that are emailed to us at the Castbar, the few that we do have. Really, personally, I prefer more PvE and lore questions. I don't know much about PvP, but lore especially, I'm super excited about and love. And so far, I don't think we've had a single lore question, and I would like to have us discuss some of that stuff. So if you guys could send one of those, that would be pretty rad.
Yeah, I think most of the questions I end up logging into Reddit to answer on the WoW subreddit, which I do from time to time. Most of those questions I answer are basically people who are tanking in PvE and raiding and in dungeons for the first time and have trouble getting over that kind of anxiety at the responsibility of that role. I think tanks have a really kind of unique job in that no matter the size of the raid, there are usually only two of them or one of them in a dungeon. And I know healers are kind of in the same boat. I identify more of the tanks because I've played that role for a couple expansions now. And I've kind of been through a lot of that process, learning how to tank effectively, learning how to be a kind of leader in the raid, learning how to deal with the anxiety and the pressure that comes with having all eyes on you, basically. So if anybody has any questions about how to improve their tanking, how to improve their raid leadership, how to how to learn, especially classes like Monk or Death Knight. I have extensive experience recently with those guys. I really would enjoy answering questions about that, especially when it comes to like the competence anxiety it takes to get over in order to be an effective raid leader or tank in general.
I personally, like I said, just like questions. As for what I've played a lot, I have played a substantial amount of primarily priest, shaman, and paladin. I have not healed on the paladin though, so I am very useless in that category. And really, like, the question can be anything. I mean, it could be about how we set up the podcast, about what we use, how it works, favorite raid, how to anything. Lore questions are fun. I love lore. Florian loves lore. Just anything. It doesn't even matter what it is. Ask a question.
Absolutely. No, and I like reaching back in my memory of the olden days, the previous expansions. People want to pick my brain or just reminisce with us about the Burning Crusade or the Wrath of the Lich King. I think all of us have played in the Wrath of the Lich King and on forward from there. There are a lot of good things that we miss about those eras. And if you have any questions like how do you guys feel walking into Bastion at Twilight for the first time, I thought that was a really unique experience. We'd like to just jam on that kind of stuff too.
Yeah, I'd be totally down for that question exactly, actually, because I remember that very clearly. Any other comments, Florian?
Nothing really. That's pretty much it. Just send us questions.
Do you have any? Yeah, go ahead. Do you have any unanswered lore questions yourself, Florian? Like if you were listening to a lore podcast, what would you ask the lore experts?
I have a lot of unanswered lore questions. Unfortunately, all of them are lore questions that Blizzard themselves has not yet answered. So I don't have anyone I can ask those questions to.
Ooh, what are they, though? I'm a little bit curious as to like what kind of puzzles you about WoW lore, because I haven't dug into it very deeply myself.
Things like, what's the deal with Titans? Or like, what do the old gods do? Like, what is their motivation? What's the function of an old god? How does it even work? Like, we don't know any of this stuff, and I really would like to know that.
What happened with Neptulon and the Kraken, whatever his name is. My brain just completely blanked on that Kraken's name.
Yeah.
I think
Ozumat.
Ozumat?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Ozumat. Fantastic. A lot of loose ends here and there.
Well, very nice. Yeah, so if anybody wants to speculate, at least, I think a lot of information about the Titans and the Old Gods was revealed in various raid dungeons, like Ulduar, I think especially. So, I mean, there's a lot to kind of go on to fuel a bunch of fan theories, and we can talk about some of the more popular fan theories that are out there on the different websites. If any of you listeners want to hear that kind of discussion.
Honestly, you could even send us a link to like a video or even a picture or something. It doesn't matter. Just send us something.
Send us your little crappy drawing and we'll review it. We'll even say it's good. It doesn't matter how bad it is.
Evan will say it's good because he likes to hand out A's.
We'll rate your drawing.
Speaking of grading things, let's go into the review. Welcome to the review section. We'll review really anything. It could be a character from the game, so if we wanted to review Jaina and everything she's done, we could. battleground, raid, dungeon, quest line, class, spec, just whatever it ends up being that we really bring up is anything that can be reviewed, we will at some point most likely get to. Last week we did a battleground. Week before that we did a class. So we're going to go back to something a little bit more standard. We're going to review a 5-man dungeon. And that 5-man dungeon is the World of Warcraft Warlords of Draenor dungeon, Shadowmoon Burial Grounds. Shadowmoon Burial Grounds is located within Shadowmoon Valley. And for the most part, it is pretty much the the final step of the entire story that takes place within the Shadowmoon Burial Grounds.
The culmination.
Culmination, that's a much better word. Thank you. And we break our review section into 3 separate pieces: ambience, gameplay, and lore. Ambience is the sound, the appearance, just everything that is just presented to your senses when you step inside and as you're going through it. Then you go into gameplay, and that is obviously the bosses. If there's something notable on loot or anything like that, boss mechanics, numbers, trash, how the trash was laid out, anything like that. Then we will go also into lore. I'm sorry, lore is part of everything we do in this game. If you don't enjoy it, that's understandable. You don't have to, but we do include it as part of our final grade. And that is obviously the story. Is there a story in here? Is it good? Is it presented? Does it make sense? Ambience is first, and we will kick it off with Evan.
I like the ambience of this place a lot. You have the cavern, which a lot of our dungeons take place in caverns. I mean, the very first descent down into the dungeon reminds me of not Ankahet the Old Kingdom, but the other Nerubian dungeon in Wrath of the Lich King. But it starts off very quickly. The very first room is expansive, but it's kind of a maze going across a balcony downstairs. So it's a big room that has a lot of depth in it, but it's not just a big open cavern. You spend a lot of time in the room getting down around the terrain, and then you go into the first boss. You go to the second boss, which is the Void Lord. Third boss, it's just kind of winding around these little passages. Some of it's worked stone, some of it's rough natural caverns and tunnels. And I think the texturing is really good because it doesn't remind me of anything back on Azeroth. I think it's all really new, textured up from scratch. I think there's kind of the infusion of like the dark purple shadow energy everywhere. Lots of different relics and kind of designs on the ground. Where you have these Shadowmoon like eclipse thing, these floor traps that explode and when you step on them. I think it's really kind of cool touches. I like all the skeletons, especially the orc-sized skeletons that are walking around. That just makes lore sense. You wouldn't have a random human skeleton in this time, or in this planet, rather. Makes
it seem a lot more consistent.
Yeah, more realistic and believable. And then I really like the Shadowmoon orcs and their kind of approach to dark magic. I think it's very celestial, but very dark celestial. It's not like the Night Elves.
It's very spiritual compared to, rather than just, I'm evil, therefore I have evil magic.
Right. And I'm not entirely sure what they were like before they started doing... Are they even doing, like, Burning Legion stuff? Because they're raising skeletons. Is that just part of their shtick, or are they doing necromancy proper?
Well, we're going to blend lore into this real quick. So, it used to be that they were using essentially what most people would consider like dark magic. And that was and that's like the magic that you see Ner'zhul using now. And it's not fel magic, it's just this like dark energy that they are able to manipulate and control through ancient teachings and stuff. And a lot of it does have to do with pulling energy from the stars and everything like that. But it was bad. I mean, it has negative effects on your body, it has negative effects on the people around you. So they got rid of it and said we're not going to do that anymore, and they became very, very peaceful people. They had a few shamans because that's really big in orc culture altogether, is shamanism. That's a huge part of orc culture. But they were really like just like happy little nomads that were still very spiritual with the stars in the world around them. Then Grommash came around and was like, hey, we're doing this Iron Horde thing. You are one of the clans. Join us or die. And then he went, I guess we're going to join you. And then Grommash went, you don't have any warriors.
Right.
You should probably figure out what makes you worth living, because otherwise I'm just going to kill you because you're worthless. Well, because what they had wasn't much, Ner'zhul completely just forsaked his entire people and went back to that old magic, and that's what he's using now.
Right, and all this, if you're a Horde player exclusively, is in the Shadowmoon Valley quest line. It goes really deep into this lore and the explanation of Ner'zhul's motives, and then the setup for the Shadowmoon Barrier grounds in general.
And that was why he turned to this, is because like Ner'zhul originally didn't want to do all of this, but then he's like, well, I have to be a complete jerk now to like everybody, and I have to be evil, so I will be, and fine.
Right. So what you have here is like, okay, well, we can talk more about that in the lore section, but as far as ambience goes, yeah, I like this kind of reminiscent of the Void Lords, and I like the kind of Eclipse kind of
the effects
theme.
of it are beautiful. These purples and silvers and whites, and
the spell effects are marvelous. And then you have the third boss, I guess, is the little worm guy. Everybody loves worms, little Marrogar kind of looking dude. Kind of cool mechanics in that. And the boss fight is in that big open cavern with the lake and everything in it. And then the last boss, of course, Ner'zhul pulls you into the Shadow Realm. I think that looks pretty visually impressive. I'm always kind of paying attention to the fight itself. I don't know if you're like in a swirling, like in the Dragon Soul raid, when you go into this weird kind of nether realm.
What's the name of that toy? I have it. Let me find it. There's a toy.
The Star Chart.
Is that what it is?
The one you get on top of the observatory.
It puts you into like a void area.
Oh, I'm not sure.
No, Star Chart just really brings out some serious stars in the skybox. Where is it? It makes everything around you Void Totem. Wow, that was. So what it does, it puts this like purple, voidy effect on everything, and then you get that awesome void swirling skybox effect above you, kind of like what the Shaw did, except make it purpley instead of white or black. And that effect is just like so beautiful, and they use it a lot, and it's all around you in the Ner'zhul fight.
Right. So all in all, yeah, I think it's really clean looking. I think all the textures are really polished. I think the place is well laid out. I think it's believable with the transition between the natural stone caverns and the worked stone kind of ritualistic temple looking places. I like all of the details and effects of the piles of bones and the different kind of patterns of the ground incantation markings and things like that. I think it's a really good package altogether.
Incidentally, on a very small side note, if you lay down the star chart and the void totem at the same time, you get void skybox with stars in it.
Nice.
That's really awesome looking.
Nice.
No, and I completely agree. And like the very first boss you come to, I mean, she's performing that ritual and she's got all the purple magic and ghosts and spirits above her. It was like, wow, that looks really awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, just the entire place just feels so strong, and the rooms themselves have character of. I mean, a lot like Auchindoun did. This is a very sacred place. It's not, all carved and beautiful and stuff like the like Auchindoun was, but this is still a very powerful and very just deep place, and it's very gorgeously presented. Where are you at on that, Florian?
I'd agree with that. It was very well designed all around, and it looks very old. Like, you can look at it and tell that this is supposed to be a special place. The texturing, as Evan said before, was really good. I looked around to see if I could find anything that looked old or looked like it was recycled. I didn't find anything. Everything looks really good in general. I like the rune circles that they had on the ground in a couple areas. I think they, in addition to being a gameplay mechanic, they looked really nice and added a nice bit of flavor to the sort of void magic that they were doing. And also the strong emphasis with all the necromancy and spirits flying around and all that, did a really good job of setting up the ambience of the place and making it feel like a place where that is both a respected burial ground and a place that's been desecrated and has all sorts of unholy things going on. It honestly looked like a place where the guy who was the precursor to the Lich King would probably hang out. So for me, it seems like it did the job.
That's a good point.
The music is also very... It's not real loud or booming or anything, but it does give you this very eerie feeling. It immediately makes me think of like when suspense movies have like the perfect music to where you feel that kind of creepiness down your back.
Right, it's a lot of kind of a French horn, brassy in a baritone range in the background, a lot of kind of eerie strings and low bass strings, and the bottom of it too. It's just like I don't know, I've never seen Phantom of the Opera, but that's how I would imagine if there was like some kind of haunted opera house. That's kind of how I characterize the ambient music for this place.
No, it's fantastic. It's great. It's really good. Everything is just presented so well. And the other thing is that you're talking about that big expansive room. I really like that I don't remember many times before that they've had these big expansive rooms like this, and that they've had this very beautiful light fog effect on it to where it just really, there's this light foggy mist that just makes everything just a little bit blurry. Kind of like if you were approaching, kind of like when you look too far into your viewing distance, but it's intentional and it's up close. It looks great. So, Florian, ambience great.
For ambience, I would give it an A. It does what it needs to do, and it has no real problems that I can complain about. It's a well-designed dungeon.
Evan.
Definitely an A, too. I think this is a great example of some of the best work they've done with this expansion.
And I'm going to give it an A+, because I thought it was wonderful and beautiful. No, it was great. It's definitely, ambient side, a beautiful, beautiful dungeon. Everything is just really fantastic about it when you step inside. We'll see if gameplay holds up as strongly, though. Florian, do you want to kick us off?
I can. In Shadowmoon Burial Grounds, it's kind of a middle ground sort of dungeon from my point of view, as far as the Warlords of Draenor dungeons go in terms of the amount and complexity of the mechanics. It has enough that the boss fights are fun, and even the ads have some mechanics that you have to watch out for. Like, for example, there are those, I think they're called bone menders or skeleton. They're healers, basically. And they will shoot out shadow bolts at you all the time, and occasionally they will cast a healing spell on the other ads, which you'll have to deal with. And I think there's enough mechanics in the trash to make it interesting and keep you from getting bored to death. The fights are generally pretty fun. Several of the fights had mechanics that were really nostalgic for me, like with Ner'zhul's Ritual of Bones, where he has a whole bunch has a line of skeletons march across the arena, and you have to kill one of them to make a hole to slip through. It reminded me of pretty much exactly the same mechanic was in End Time, where if you fight Sylvanas in that dungeon, then she uses the same mechanic, except I think she summons zombies or ghouls instead of skeletons, which I thought was a nice little throwback to that dungeon. And my main disappointment with the mechanics is that in the heroic difficulty, as far as I can tell, there are no new mechanics. It seems like the exact same dungeon, just everything just hits harder. And I was a little disappointed because I figured, for heroic, as we usually do, we'd get at least one or two new abilities for every boss, but we really didn't get that here.
I think that some of the abilities got more intense. Like with the worm, there on heroic, there's more when he's slapping the ground and all the different places. There's more of those happening. So even though there might not be more abilities, the abilities get scaled up a little bit more intense.
And are there 2 and 3 worms, like little worm ads that come along and fight with him in the normal difficulty, or is that only heroic?
I couldn't tell you because I've only done the dungeon on heroic.
Oh, interesting.
Well, I was so intrigued with because it's a level 100 dungeon, so it's normal and heroic. You both have to be level 100 to do. And I was so intrigued with all of the lore and everything. I didn't do a single dungeon until I was level 100. And then some of them I was locked out of, so I just went whatever. But I was already at like 625 gear, I want to say,
right,
from all my Gorgrond upgrades. And so I was already able to do heroic straight out. So I was just like, all right, I'll just jump into heroic.
Nice.
So I don't even know what the true difference is between normal and heroic. I was just speculating at what the difference could be.
I think, Florian, if you want some extra mechanics and a little bit more challenge mode is where it's at. I think challenge mode always introduces a couple new boss abilities, and I think that's where Blizzard put their extra kind of development focus rather than the difference between normal and heroic. Kind of like the difference between normal and heroic rating. There's no new abilities in heroic rating. Numbers just a little bit tougher.
Yeah, I do understand that, but it feels to me like every dungeon, the heroic version is harder than the normal version. I don't feel that the gap in difficulty is as big for Shadowmoon Battleground as it is for any of the other dungeons in Warlords of Draenor. And that's the main reason I'm a little disappointed. I don't feel like heroic is really quite hard enough to really be called heroic.
Gotcha. I do have, there's one pull after the first boss going around the little spiral ramp going towards the worm boss. This is after the second boss, I guess. There's a room with 2 spiders on one side and 2 spiders on the other side and a couple of little lads. And if you pull all 4 of those spiders at once, you better be blowing cooldowns because it'll devour an entire group. I think they do random big spell bursts on random party members, so your healer's going to be tied up healing big chunks out of your DPS's health. The main tank's going to be taking a whole lot of damage too, and he's going to have to blow his cooldowns. That definitely kind of sets it apart as definitely a heroic fight. It's hard to get in that much trouble in a trash pull in a heroic dungeon, except in other places where you have a high mob density like Grimmerl Depot. But for a relatively small pull, not too serious, just 4 big mobs and a couple little guys, it's pretty dangerous.
Right. And that really is. There's few normal dungeons that the trash is threatening across any expansion. Normal dungeons are the trash is generally meant to be, well, even in Cataclysm, I mean, we can look back at Cataclysm as, when dungeons were their hardest, especially heroics.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people speak of the nightmares of Cataclysm heroics, Cataclysm launch heroics, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
But their normal dungeons were really easy. So that's just, and that was one of the hardest parts of Cataclysm dungeons was the trash, like Vortex Pinnacle. So, I mean, that's a very good point with the spiders. On the point of the bosses, there was a point of that, wow, logic just completely left my brain in points of formulating words. The first boss I thought was great because of there's not a whole lot of things that tell you about what's happening in the fight. Especially, like, my first time in there, I completely got exploded by the runes on the ground on the circle around her. You know what I'm talking about, Florian?
Yeah.
Yeah, I literally ran over like 6 of them in a row because I was like running and then I ran around in the circle and I hit every single one of them in the circle and blew up and died. And that was really interesting. The boss after her, the bone guy, Bone something, Bone Maw, he was less exciting. Ner'zhul, though, and the Worm, these were both really good fights, like you were talking about with the Ritual of Bones. Things like that are those are fun because it takes not only does it take your attention away from the boss, but it really kind of gives you just a little bit more. It's less about just tanking and spanking, because even if there's avoidable mechanics, like, bosses putting bad things on the ground, it's still just focusing on the same guy, and it's very intriguing and very engaging for me whenever I really have to focus on something else, especially like ads that have to be focused, not just like, these are ads, you need to get rid of them, otherwise we'll get overwhelmed. Such as like the different parts of the worm that would spawn, and then Ner'zhul with his ritual of bones. That being said, though, like, I thought the first boss was great. The second boss was okay. The third boss, like, I enjoyed the multiple ads and stuff, but he didn't do a whole lot. I mean, the only thing he did was like slam the ground a lot. And then Ner'zhul was a pretty interesting fight. So, Florian, what is your final grade on gameplay?
It's generally pretty good, so I'm going to say probably a B. I would have just liked hard mode, the heroic, to be a little harder than it was. Aside from that, it's pretty solid gameplay all around.
Okay. And Evan, what is your grade on gameplay?
I'm going to give it an A.
And I'm going to give it a B as well. Mostly, I'm going to derive this from the second boss being less than I would like it to be, and then just the simplicity of the third boss. I think the trash is good. First and final boss were really great bosses with some definite surprises for me, at least. But the second and third boss drag it down just enough to a B. And then we'll go into lore. And Evan, you have recently completed all of the Shadowmoon Valley questline, correct?
Yeah, just for the first time, I just finished that My Alliance character.
Okay, congratulations.
Thank you.
And so it's good, though, because the thing that I think hurts lore for this dungeon the strongest is that if you are not Alliance, specifically, if you are not Alliance, this dungeon's lore a lot of it will be lost. And that is unfortunate, because the lore in here is very, very strong and very, very good. Especially because, I mean, Ner'zhul is one of the warlords. He's, technically one of the people that we're supposed to be here to stop. Did you have any immediate... Because I know you're primarily a Horde player, Evan, so what was your immediate thoughts on this dungeon? Like, had you done it before you finished the quest line for Shadowmoon Valley?
Yeah, sure. I did it quite a few times on my Horde character before I ever started leveling up my Alliance character in Shadowmoon Valley. So I have both sides of the coin after having done it, and then I also have doing the dungeon before ever having done the quest line as well. And I will say that, I mean, you have the inn quest. I think there are 2 NPCs at your inn or your tavern that send you to Shadowmoon Burial Grounds for whatever reason, to collect a trinket and this and that. And they give you a little bit of background on why they want this or that, or why this or that exists there. And so you get a little bit of a taste. And apart from that, it's hard to grasp a lot of what's really going on apart from what's really in front of you. I mean, clearly, Ner'zhul's there. He says, "Oh, I'm going to kill all you guys," and brings you into the Shadow Realm, and you end up defeating him. Apart from that, it's just pretty self-explanatory. They are at a burial ground. They're raising lots of corpses. There are some void lords, and they're just baddies we got to squash. There isn't too much thought that I was kind of putting into the whole lore aspect on my first couple playthroughs. And then after going through the Shadowmoon Valley quest lines, I have a little bit more context on what Ner'zhul's been up to in the past couple days, weeks, months. I don't know what the Shadowmoon orcs are all about, what they're doing in the burial grounds. That's still not clear to me. I know that Ner'zhul's goal is to summon this dark star, and he kind of almost did that. And now I'm not entirely sure what he's up to in the burial grounds themselves. I might have glanced over a little bit of the quest text, to be honest. But
in the burial grounds, because he had forsaken his ancestors, so they no longer answered his call. Because that's a big thing for orcs and shamans, is that the ancestors and the elements have to be on your side, and that gives you your power. And he was no longer a shaman, and he had abandoned his ancestors, so his power was purely coming from these dark energies. When he summoned the dark star, Velen, sorry, at this point, I'm sure you people know.
No.
People.
That's the biggest. That's one of the biggest things that happens on the whole quest line.
Yeah,
We don't have to go into that.
And the expansion's been out for like a month and a half, 2 months. I'm sure you've seen it somewhere. I can spoil something at this point, right?
All right, you guys can skip ahead 2 minutes if they want to hear what happens.
Skip ahead 10 seconds. Velen sacrifices himself so that the Dark Star is saved. So that plan falls through. So what he, incidentally, if you're back now, you're good now.
It's a tearjerker. Oh god.
Yeah, it really was. Anyway, so if you would turn the podcast on mute for 3 seconds, you could. I think what he's doing in the Shadowmoon Burial Grounds at that point is he is going there to absorb all of the powers of his ancestors.
Oh, kind of like Terran Gore and Alkindune. Just give me the souls. I need all the souls, please.
Exactly. And that's his goal. I mean, it's also a place where it's a lot easier for him to connect into the Void Realm. Incidentally, which is why he's able to just rip us into it. So, I mean, because there's so much energy there and all the souls and stuff are there, it's a stronger tie to the Nether Realm, and his goal is to increase his power there by essentially eating all of his ancestors.
Very nice. I bet they're delicious.
Our fellow lore buff is currently silent. Florian, where are you at on the lore? Did you like it?
I quite liked it. In general, the Shadowmoon Valley questline was awesome, and this was a really good end cap to it. I was honestly surprised that we were going to kill Ner'zhul in a 5-man dungeon. He was somebody that I was pretty sure would end up being raid boss. So I found it very odd that we were taking him out this early, but with Ner'zhul, as we have historically seen, he is not a person who likes to stay dead. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see him again in another form, perhaps a more black armored form. But in general, the lore was really good. I particularly liked there's not a lot of lore about him, but the second boss of the dungeon, let's see what his name is, Nalish or Nahalish or something like that.
Right.
I can't pronounce it. I don't know how an H right after an N
losing subscribers, man. Losing subscribers.
I think that would be pronounced Nalish.
Yeah, I liked him, and in general, a lot of the Void really isn't well explained in WoW, and the things that live in the Void I find very interesting because we don't really know that much about them. So any Void lore I'm really a fan of.
Yeah, I'm going to weigh in and say this guy's name is Nalish. Is that how you said it, Michael?
Yep.
That's what I want to say, but you can never be entirely sure with these things.
Bone Maw.
I think that is pronounced Bonema? Bonema. Bonema.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's definitely Bonamao.
So I want to touch on that a little bit. What you have here is you have void magic, which is like what our warlocks practice. They're summoning demons, which is a void lord is a kind of demon from the Twisting Nether. I'm guessing, is that right? Like our warlocks get their succubi and fell hunters and doom guards and everything from. They pull them through the burning or the Twisting Nether from somewhere else, maybe.
It's not purely void magic though. Like
yeah, but there's also
on fell magic much more strongly. Go ahead though.
There's also the dead summoning, the dead raising, the skeletons, which is more of the Lich King kind of scourge magic,
right?
Which is a different fetch of magic altogether. And then you have this eclipse magic, which is almost druidic. It's celestial. So yeah, the celestial magic, this void magic, and also this kind of scourge magic. And I don't know what the scourge get their magic from. I guess Ner'zhul's, Lich King. Maybe it's just his whole deal. Maybe the scourge works and operates under celestial magic or void magic in its rawer sense. But you have this kind of blending of different facets of the game like I've never seen before. Like, for example, another example is in the Shadow Labyrinth in Auchindoun. You have the second boss, which is a warlock, and he's summoning void spawns, like void walkers, right, to come and explode and heal him, right? But there's also, he's doing it in a room that's full of piles of bones and skeletons. So you have this like raising the dead, and then you also have this summoning void spawn. So it's another mixture of that thing. And I think the Shadow Council is involved in the Shadow Labyrinth as well. So that's kind of their shtick. Is that not right?
That's true. At times I've kind of wondered if maybe shadow magic and void magic are just kind of the same thing. And, you know, maybe there's just two different names for it in Azeroth.
Right.
From what I can tell, there is, like, we have fel magic, we have arcane magic, we have shamanistic magic, and then we have the light. And the reason that I'm not putting shadow magic into this is because, for the most part, what we see, like a lot of the shadow magic and stuff that we've seen in the past, has been born from, like, there isn't anything outright suggesting that the light comes from the Naru, which are the crazy glass, weird-shaped beings that you see. You see a ton of them in the Burning Crusade. We've seen just a couple of them so far in Warlords. But they've been described as beings of pure light. And we also know that they are able to empower us to a ridiculous extent, and they have a ton of power on their own. And so with that, we've also seen a ton of the shadow magic come from fallen Naru. The first one we see is Entropius in Sunwell, and we actually get to see multiple more things that are born from fallen Naru. Whether it's fragments of them, and they're called, what's the name of them? They're called like void gods. We see Decimatus, which is in Oshugun, which is in Agron. We see Karnoth, which is in Shadowmoon Burial Grounds. Ner'zhul summons it. When Ner'zhul does another thing, we see Xan, which is at the top of the little plateau up there. And then Nalish is actually the same thing as these other guys. He's just a much more powerful one.
Oh, really?
More and more. I mean, this wasn't just, born out of just a little bit of the energy. There's multiple people here that are summoning him into existence. And so I think a lot of this power is all from the same source. It's just what it's being derived from. The light is, in my opinion, obviously none of this can be has any consecrated evidence of any kind. But I mean, if the Naru are these big, powerful beings that are like this, then it's easily thought of that the light could come from them, and that the shadow magic could be the same thing, especially if we do with what the Shadowmoon are, and they're actually reaching out to Naru and fallen Naru from, that are light years away.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think my biggest concern with this is the discrepancy between just the player warlock spell kit. I mean, you have these Burning Legion demons, like, for example, in Auchendoon, the right wing of Auchendoon there, and you're fighting the Doom Guards and the big burning imps, and you're casting lots of fel magic, and it's like this green fire and red fire. And the warlocks have that, but they also have a Void Lord, and they also have Shadow Bolt, and Shadow Fury, which... I mean, Shadow Fury is a little demon thing. That's obviously kind of a fel magic thing. But a Shadow Bolt is in corruption. I mean, these are very kind of shadow magic things. It's not. I don't think of the Burning Legion when I think of casting a Shadow Bolt. I think more of this Ner'zhul's crew.
I think this heavily comes from... this goes into the suspension of disbelief of that for game purposes, you have all of those tools, but most warlocks would not.
Gotcha.
Because you would have something that you are focused much more on. You'd have your field of study. I mean, as a mage, you would be focused on, are you an arcane mage, a frost mage, a fire mage? You wouldn't have spells for multiple of those. You would only have your frost, fire, magic, whatever.
Right.
And I think that's where this comes from very heavily, is that for game purposes, you have access to all of this kind of different stuff. But we've seen tons and tons of warlocks that don't have pets, whereas almost all warlocks in WoW have pets, unless they eat them. But that's a fairly new thing.
Oh no, you've been able to sacrifice a pet ever since Classic WoW.
Really? Why
That's
didn't
true.
anyone ever do it? Was it just did it just get a buff recently that made it worth doing?
I'm not sure exactly, but I remember it used to be a bug where you could sacrifice your pet with Grimoire Sacrifice and then have a priest resurrect it and maintain the buff you got.
That's
and
hilarious.
Have your pet as well. Yeah, this is a little flashbulb memory I got from that era. But I knew that a talent existed then. They might have removed it when they revamped the talent system and just introduced it again recently. That's my guess, but I haven't played a Warlock ever until now, so that's my I'm not entirely sure.
So, I have a quick question for you, both of you. Since we're in the lore section, what is your opinion on bosses that essentially really have no lore to them that are in these dungeons? Like the very first boss, Sedana Bloodfury, we've never seen her before.
Right.
Whatsoever. I mean, and stuff like Nalish, the Void guy, that's different. You summon a bad thing from somewhere else, but Sedana, she's, this very powerful shadow person from the Shadowmoon clan that we never saw before we actually get here. What's your opinion on characters like that?
I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to have bosses like that, because you do have to fill out a boss roster in every dungeon. If you don't have enough bosses, people are going to get bored. We learned that with raids like Obsidian Sanctum, where it's just show up and fight one boss. And the hold on, I've completely lost the train of thought. Right, Sedana Bloodfury. I really think she at least could have been worked into the Shadowmoon Valley quest line. I mean, it was a pretty long quest line. There are a lot of quests in there, some of which are just kind of filler quests. They're obviously just put in there to give you something to do, to give you some experience points.
Sure.
So she could have easily been worked into it, and I kind of wonder why she wasn't. If maybe originally that was part of the plan and she was cut, or maybe the team that works on dungeons and the team that works on quests are two separate teams and they're not communicating with each other. It's not necessarily a bad thing to have bosses that just aren't mentioned in the lore, but it always does make me wonder.
Well, and that's the reason I ask. I mean, because like in Auchindoun, the third boss, the demon that summoned, that's just demon number 293342 that came out of the Twisting Never.
It's a really sweet model on that guy too.
Oh no, it's awesome. Don't get me wrong. I mean, and he has a special name, but it's no big deal that he has a special name because
right.
He's just some demon that came out of the Nether. Whereas this is an orc that is clearly probably had some sort of significant purpose, and that's the reason that I asked.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that they need to have a backstory with every single orc or Draenei NPC that they put us up against. I don't think the Shauna Bloodfury chick is not going to be any more or less significant if she's just on her own as a one-fer, or if we do a 5-quest line in Shadowmoon Valley where she kills somebody in their whole family or their mom. We have to watch a cinematic scene about it. I don't think that really adds too much more than we get right off the bat. It kind of calls to mind that quest line we do that culminates with Garona trying to assassinate Khadgar.
Mm-hmm.
You and the Horde and Alliance can both know what I'm talking about, because this quest line is mirrored in Frostfire Ridge as well as Shadowmoon Valley, almost exactly the same. You go look for a little object and you are trying to find Gul'dan, and you end up spying on him, and you get to see him talking to his lieutenants there, Cho'Gall or Tarangor, and he sends them off on their ways. And he also has like a third guy there, like a red shirt, and he says, "Oh, it's your time to defeat this intruder," or whatever. And they turn into a demon, and then you kill them. But it is kind of like who is this person that was in this meeting with Tarangor and Cho'Gall? I mean, obviously some really important, powerful, operative. And then they're just there to give you somebody to kill,
Sure.
basically. So when you have people like that in the storyline, like where'd they come from? I'm just gonna assume that each of these warlords have a whole lot of lieutenants that are probably working behind the scenes. And you're not going to face them until you're kind of infiltrating these areas like the Shadowmoon Burial Grounds.
Right, and I'm in no way going to let it influence my grade. It was purely just a question. So Florian, lore grade.
Lore grade, I'm going to say a B. It did a really good job of capping off the Shadowmoon Burial questline, which helped to establish a lot of the lore in the dungeon. But I didn't feel like in the dungeon itself there was quite enough lore given, or enough lore in the dungeon itself. And we also had people, like you mentioned with Sadame Blood Fury, where we don't even know what the deal with her is. She's obviously important, because we have to fight her on the way in, and she's a boss. But
and she's
we don't
summoning
know,
a whole bunch, summoning or eating or something, a whole bunch of horrible-looking soul things.
Exactly, and that's what keeps it from an A.
And Evan, what about you?
I'm gonna give it a. I think I'm gonna give it a B, because I'm gonna tie in the entire Shadowmoon Valley quest line, because this is the kind of culmination of that, and the story of Ner'zhul and his kind of the background I thought was really enlightening. I mean, I've learned more about Ner'zhul and his motives than I have about any of the other warlords so far, I feel. So there's that, and I'm not going to give it an A, because although it really contributed to the gameplay, fighting a worm monster in the boss that's supposed to be about Shadow Clan orcs, I feel like was kind of a missed opportunity. It's almost like a filler, not a filler in gameplay. I mean, I think it was a really fun encounter, but lore-wise, I mean, it doesn't contribute anything. And if you're doing things like that just to make the dungeon a little bit longer or make it a little bit more balanced, then you're leaving. You're leaving something out that could have been a bigger lore point. It could have pulled us more to the story, whereas it did not really do that.
Right, and no one even summons Bone Maw or anything like that.
He's just a native there. I mean, there are a lot of those monsters there. You have the spiders and everything just roaming around just because that's their home, you know?
But at the same time, like someone has to control him, or have maybe Ner'zhul has some way some spell effect he puts on them, but we don't know that. Like,
no.
Even his Bone Maw's lore would have worked perfectly fine if we would have seen Ner'zhul walking down that pathway, and he jumps out, and Ner'zhul just casts a spell on him, and he calms down and goes back underwater, and Ner'zhul walks on.
Right.
That completely establishes Bone Maw's lore in its entirety, and gives him complete purpose.
They wanted a little bit of a reveal there at the very end, where Ner'zhul's busy with his workings in that final chamber there. He didn't want to show his face before that. But yeah, I understand what you mean. You could have tied it in somehow, anyhow, but we haven't really done that. Then again, Blizzard kind of does like to do this kind of thing, where you're in this dungeon, and not only are there the enemy forces at work, but you also have to deal with the dangerous natives. For example, like the bottom of Throne of Thunder. I mean, those Megara and the Tortuga or whatever weren't, or Tortos, I guess is the name.
No, Tortuga is definitely a better name.
I think it's a Pokemon, isn't it? Yeah,
no,
the Pokemon starter.
Is it? I don't think so. Tortuga is the port in Pirates of the Caribbean.
No way.
And I get a whisper from behind me that says it's a real place.
Tortuga. Yeah, Tortuga Island. Okay, my bad. I think Tortuga is a Spanish for turtle.
Maybe, I don't know.
At any rate, yeah, I think they could have done something there. But yeah, you have the Blizzard kind of fascination with, you don't want to just fight Shadowmoon Orc after Shadowmoon Orc after Shadowmoon Orc. Maybe they want different mechanics. The only way you can do the mechanic. Oh yeah, I mean,
but
we
his
already
mechanics were terrible.
No, I don't.
All he did is slap his face into the ground.
But he has that cool inhale, and it throws you off the arena, and you have to utilize your environment to get back onto the platform. And then he has his little friends that spawn too, and you have to manage that and avoid. I mean, I think it's complicated, not complicated, complex. I don't know. It wasn't an overly complicated fight, but I think it was kind of fun, and it was just not a tank and spank. Which, I mean, after leveling so many alts at the end of Mr. Pandaria during that kind of dry spell, fights that aren't just a tank and spank are welcome, for me.
All right, and my final grade is a B as well. Mostly for the points that we've already touched on, and I think that I just wanted just a little bit more to actually give it an A, to be completely satisfied with the lore. And the thing that I will give it about it is that it posed a question in a good way, and that is Ner'zhul actually dead, like Florian was talking about? Because Florian had commented before that he'd got rid of his soul and all of that kind of different stuff. So that is a good. Is he actually dead, or did we just kill the vessel that he was currently operating through? So that is a question I enjoy. I'll still give it a B though, and that brings the final grade to a B plus if we would have gotten a single A in lore, or if more than just Evan had given an A in gameplay, that would have brought the average up to an A. So this was a significantly just well done dungeon overall. I think over time our grading is going to become a little bit more critical, as well. That's what happens to critics, right? You become jaded. That's the way that works, right?
I guess so. If we did a Miss Pandaria review during one of our practice shows, didn't we? Didn't we review Storm's Out Brewery? After 2 years of that, man, I had nothing good to say about that dungeon anymore.
Yeah. So I mean, B plus overall, and it's really a great dungeon. Go enjoy it. Do you guys have any other comments that you'd like to add on to that? No. Okay. Silence means no. Just I believe I said last week that silence means yes. Silence means whatever I need it to mean. It's the end of the show, everybody. Thank you so much for coming in. Even without any news, we still managed to run this thing for 2 hours. Good job on us. So if you want to get in contact with the show, we have an email at thecastbar@gmail.com. Again, our Twitter is @CastbarPodcast. Colin leaves a voicemail at 508-738-2278. The music for our bumpers is all done by Kevin MacLeod. You can find his work at incomtech.com. If you would like to get a hold of me, send an email to my attention at thecastbar@gmail.com. I also have my own personal Twitter, which is @SchwanMichael. I realize I say this, and my last name is terrible for people to spell. It's SCHWAHN, Michael. Evan, where are people able to get a hold of you at?
Oh, you can just send an email to thecastbar@gmail.com and just say, hey, this is to Evan. I mean, if you had anything to ask me specifically, also you can hit me up on Twitter. I have a Twitter account at EDCWow.
And incidentally, even if you send an email with the attention to somebody, we might still have it air on the show and just let them answer it. Florian, and where are people able to communicate with you at?
Well, just like everyone else, they can email me at the Castbar's email address, or you can find me on Twitter at FALANGX.
Phalanx.
Yes. I don't like proper spelling.
All right, guys, have a good night. Oh.
You are out of time.